Hello everyone, my name is Alex. I'm a 2000 rated over-the-board chess player, and in this series we're going to 2200 rapid ELO, while I'll be explaining my thought process as best as I can for your education and entertainment. Today we start with a Vienna with knight c3. My opponent goes knight f6, and we will go pawn to f4, the Vienna Gambit. And yeah, I play a lot of Vienna and Vienna Gambit on this channel. I've got a whole playlist dedicated to it, and a full guide to the Vienna Gambit if you're interested. But in my mind, it's essentially a much improved version of the King's Gambit. It's maybe less aggressive than the King's Gambit, but in my opinion, an improved version. And I've had great success with it, up to like 2300 blitz online, and I beat, I think, a 2200 over the board in a classical game with the Vienna Gambit. So it's definitely very viable. And my opponent goes d5, which is the main line. So after takes, knight takes, we have the option of knight f3 or queen f3. Knight f3 is the old main move, and I have tried it, and I've tried to learn some of the theory for it, but I'm really not a fan. I prefer the queen f3 line, which is objectively not quite as good as the knight f3 line, I believe. But I think the position is more intuitive to play and also more fun. I think there's fewer lines for black which feel comfortable from the black side. Now, don't get me wrong, there are lines where black can even be better if he plays it well. But I think I had a rapid tournament maybe 4 or 5 months ago, which I did a video on the channel for the game that I'm referencing, where my opponent had booked up against my Vienna very, very well. He knew like 15 or so moves of pure theory, where he ended up slightly better out of the opening, but there was still so much richness in the position that I ended up outplaying him over like the next 10 moves, and I went on to win that game. That was a very interesting game. But okay, my 2176 rated opponent goes pawn c6, which looks natural, securing the d5 pawn. But I don't think it's a very good move, because normally this pawn is supposed to go to c5 to break up my pawn structure in the center of the board. So a better move here might be pawn c5, for example. A lot of people go bishop e7, which is fine, and some people actually fall for the trap of going queen g3, targeting g7, and then bishop h4 pins the queen to the king. I think I've actually played that once or twice before when I was first learning the Vienna, so don't fall for that one. The whole point here is basically, after this trade of knights on c3, to build this central structure and build behind it. So, for example, here you might think, oh, queen g3, and if black castles to defend g7, then bishop h6, forcing pawn g6 to stop checkmate, and then we win the exchange. No, queen g3 just blunders the queen. So don't blunder that. Just go bishop d3. We point the bishops at the black king. Our queen is pointed at the black king. The knight will come to e2. We will castle to point more on the f-file, and the knight will most likely come to f4 and either put pressure on a bishop on e6, where the bishop most often goes, or the knight can come to h5 to apply pressure to the dark squares. And yeah, the move c6 kind of just feels like a waste of time, to be honest. And don't get me wrong, the black center is very strong with this pawn chain. Like, I completely understand the reasoning behind it. But the fact of the matter is that I want a closed center. A closed center favors me. It's common knowledge or common chess principle that if you are trying to attack your opponent, you want a closed center, because then it's difficult for for your opponent to, one, create counterplay. For example, if the center was wide open right now, black could create counterplay down the center, facilitate trades, and weaken the power of my attack. And also, it makes it more difficult for black to transfer pieces from the queen side to the king side if there's less squares to use in the center of the board and it's more clogged up. So, we want a close center. I don't mind that black center is very strong, because by not playing c5, my center is also very strong. Now, f6 is a very common pawn break in these positions, and I expect my opponent to probably play it. And on f6, In some positions, e6 is actually a very strong move, giving up the pawn, which looks ridiculous, but with the purpose of keeping the f-file closed and keeping the center closed. Again, this is... I'm genuinely telling you that in some positions where f6 is played, e6 is the best move for white, just sacrificing the pawn just to keep the center closed. Just to keep the center closed, because then the attack can be far more likely to happen. Okay, bishop e6. Let me think. Okay, I'm going to castle. Knight f4 is a move that I would like to play to prevent f6, because then I'm threatening to take the bishop. But I don't want to play it just yet, because if I go knight f4, queen d7 defends the bishop and prepares pawn f6. So I'm not too concerned about pawn f6, because if it's played, I'm going to go queen to h5, threatening checkmate. And if you go g6, I'm just going to play take, 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 king over. And there should be some sort of win at some point in that position, I think. I'm pretty confident that we can get a winning position there. Some knight f4 idea, it should be very nice. But c5, so my opponent goes for c5, meaning that c6 was essentially a waste of time. And my opponent's a good player, so I assume he's realized that he needs to try to attack me in the center and open up the position. Taking here, for example, and I assume black is probably better, because our pawn structure would be horrific. Black takes with check and creates good counterplay and can try to facilitate trades, which of course we don't want, because we want to attack our opponent. So we have a few options. We have knight to f4, first and foremost, attacking the bishop, which is interesting, but I don't think it works on account of pawn to c4. I have had some positions where I've actually taken on c4 and taken on b7 and won the rook. I mean, in this position, I don't think it works because the knight just goes to d7. But I have had that before in an over-the-board game, which I had a winning position and went on to lose a while ago, actually. The other consideration is queen to g3, going for this bishop h6 idea. But again, I think just bishop e7 and my queen is just out of place. Alternatively, I could go knight to g3, preparing to bring my knight into the attack. If black takes, no worries. However, if knight g3, if c4, I can go bishop to f5, and my bishop is fine. That's not a problem. What I'm also thinking is if knight g3, my opponent goes knight c6, and basically says, okay, your knight should have been guarding the center, and you're now taking your eyes off of the center, and we do not want to open up the center. So it's interesting. If I go for an immediate queen to h5, most likely forcing g6. Queen h6. Some interesting ideas of going knight f4, knight g6, pawn g6, bishop g6, pawn g6, and like queen g6. And then something like check, king here, and taking on e6 with check, and I get 3 pawns for the piece. I can also consider rook b1, just attacking b7, which is actually kind of annoying for black to deal with. If knight c6, I just take. Yeah, I like that. I like rook b1. Rook b1 is often a move in these positions, and most of the time, it doesn't really change the evaluation, because it's essentially just like a throw-in move. Black defends in some manner, like let's say b6, and then the game just continues as if nothing happened, because it's not a massive deal. But I think it's a useful move to include. I think it's useful, because maybe the knight on c6 is a bit less stable if it's not defended by the pawn. And actually, yeah, then like c4, I could take and take the knight. And be up a pawn. I mean, maybe bishop d5 would be an issue in that position, because I don't have that many squares for the queen, but it's worth considering. So okay, let's say b6, knight f4 looks valid. Going for maybe something like take and queen h5, g6, take, king h8, check on h6, king g8, and queen e6. Actually, yeah, taking on e6, if the knight goes to c6, the knight will be undefended. Ooh. That could be a big deal. That could be a huge deal. So maybe b6 is a bad move, even though it looks very natural. I mean, how else does black defend the pawn, though? He could go queen c7, but then maybe I don't have to worry about bishop h4, and then I can go for a move like queen g3, perhaps, threatening bishop h6, and if king h8, knight f4, knight c6, knight h5, pawn g6. It's interesting, isn't it? I'm not sure if we ever win. I mean, like knight f6, bishop f6, rook f6. Actually, no, sorry, I don't have to play that. I can go bishop h6, because if he takes my knight, I mate him on g7. And then I connect the rooks as well. And then that looks quite interesting. Okay, there's definitely good play here. I don't think queen c7 is amazing, because we can probably go queen g3. But even if queen c7, knight f4, knight c6, take. Queen g4 looks good. Pressure and pressure. Let's see. Okay, this is not a move I expected. I mean, I know of this move. I didn't think it was very strong. I mean, bishop f5 is effectively forced. But d5 is a permanent weakness. Because it's a backwards pawn, right? At the end of the day, it can't be defended by another pawn. And we have pressure, and we can add even more pressure with knight f4. If black takes here, I'm not really sure if it benefits him. Because, I mean, our knight will get involved very quickly via f4 or g3. b7 is still weak. Do not forget about that. This looks pretty crushing. And this is one of my favorite types of Vienna systems where black goes into this structure. Essentially, this pawn structure is the one that I really like, where white clogs up the center, has the open f-file, and just has these monster bishops pointing at the black king. And this knight coming from e2 to f4 can be so incredibly powerful. Hopefully I can showcase that. So, okay, pawn to b6. By the way, if you're enjoying the video so far, please drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already. I'd really appreciate it. Also, b6, I suppose he probably delayed it because then c4 wouldn't be able to be played because of take, take, and take. And bishop d5, I can just take on a7. Knight c6, I can take on b6. That's not a problem. So, makes sense, but I don't think c4 is the best idea. I'm really not sure about that move. So, okay, what's stopping us from going queen g3? If take, then take. I'd love to play knight f4, but then bishop takes. So that doesn't work. So, okay, queen g3, threatening bishop to h6. If pawn g6, then I just go bishop h6 anyway. You can't take because of the pin. And after rook e8, take, take. I mean, knight f4, and it looks effectively like game over. We're threatening everything, so that's GG. So here, g6 can't be played. So what do? King h8? I guess, yeah. Maybe queen g4 is stronger. Because then I can play knight to f4 because the queen defends the bishop. I'm also threatening to just win the bishop. If queen g4, take... rook take, queen d7, bishop h6, pawn g6. Maybe I don't want my queen on g4. I can just double up, though. King h8. Then worst case, I can go rook here. This rook is hanging anyway. So queen g4, queen g3. Does it matter? Well, if queen g3, black actually can go bishop h4. Whether it's good or not, I don't know. I could take first, but the problem is my dark-squared bishop hasn't developed yet, so after queen g4, you can take like this, but I want to take with the rook, not the king. So I'm going to say queen g3. I think that makes a lot of sense. I don't need the knight to come to f4. I can delay that. I can take, and then go knight f4, for example. If I want to. Or I can play something like take, knight f4, or queen, or bishop g5, knight f4, something like that. e6 is going to be super weak, super weak. So, yeah, this is looking very, very nice. And I suppose, I think maybe taking would be a good idea. Although, I mean, it's still so difficult. I mean, like, take, if king h8, maybe that's the best line. But I mean, bishop e3, I'm going to double up. f7 is going to be very weak if f6 is played. I could just push. And then knight f4, supporting e6, attacking d5. The rook will be attacking d5. It could crumble very quickly. Very, very quickly. Okay. So, yeah, bishop h4, I think we just go queen to g4. And the bishop is weird. It's not really helping the black position at all. So, and the queen can't move, otherwise the bishop hangs. It doesn't look right. So that looks good to me. So I'm not worried about that. If pawn g6, take and knight f4 looks pretty good. Or actually, sorry, no, bishop h6. And after rook here, take, knight there, that's game over, because I'm threatening knight e6, but I'm also threatening knight g6, pawn g6, queen g6, king h8, and queen g7 checkmate. No, I don't think that works. I don't think that works. Maybe my opponent was relying on the idea of bishop h4, queen g4, and pawn to h5, trying to force my queen off of the g file so my bishop would hang. But I don't have to do that. I don't know how black defends this. If he goes for a move like bishop to f8, if here... Okay, that's interesting. But after queen g4, e6 is weak, g6 is still weak. I'm still threatening take, and take with mate. But now the bishop is also hanging. Okay. Okay, so if I go take, king h8, rook f7 ends the game. Completely ends the game. There's no queen g7. Even if there was, I could take this. You can't block on g7. So rook f7 just wins. Yeah, you have to give up the queen, and then, I mean, yeah, this is obviously game over. So, yeah, that is the power of the Vienna Gambit. Black doesn't have to accept the Vienna Gambit for it to be incredibly deadly. But, yeah, I mean, that was just a perfect game against, like, a high 2100 rated player. The Vienna Gambit, incredibly viable, as shown. But let's jump into the analysis and see what the computer has to say. Okay, so 92.5% accuracy for us, 76.7% for my opponent. Let's jump into it. So, of course, we have the Vienna with knight c3. We've had quite a few videos in this rating climb recently with knight to c6, the Max Lang defense, which I know a lot of people struggle with, so check out the previous episodes for that. But my opponent goes knight f6, the Vienna Gambit with f4. And d5 is the main line. So if you want to see basically everything from this position, then check out my full Vienna course, which is like, I don't know, like an hour 20 long, covers the majority of the lines. My opponent goes d5, which is the best move. Take. And as I said, knight f3 is technically the best move here. But I don't like these lines. I think the main line is like bishop c5, d4, bishop b4, bishop d2, and I really hate having to deal with c5 here. It feels like we're completely on the back foot, and I hate it. So, personally, I prefer queen f3. And my opponent goes knight takes c3, which I think is the most common move, but it's also the one that I most like. More testing is f5, which is what my opponent played in that over the board game that I was talking about, and the line goes like d3, take, d4, queen g3, I think it's like bishop e6, c4, knight c6, knight f3, no, sorry, bishop e2. And it's a very interesting line. And like I said, my opponent booked up very, very nicely, but we ended up coming out on top in that one. But my opponent goes knight c3, which I think is the easiest line for us to face, and goes c6, which, as you can see, the engine hates and thinks that we're almost +1 already. Now, interestingly, the engine wants the immediate queen to g3. d4 it considers inaccurate because of queen h4, g3, and queen g4. What if we go bishop e2? What am I missing? Queen f3, knight f3, bishop e7, castles. I mean, we're obviously better here, but it's just to what extent, I guess. I still think this is nice. But anyway, bishop e7. Oh, sorry, as I was saying, queen g3 is the best move, which stops queen h4. And if bishop e7, then we take. So the engine wants c5, which like is so hard for black to play, considering he just played c6. And if he goes for a move like bishop e6, let's say, then knight f3, let's say knight d7. Recommends knight g5. Wow. That is bold. I went d4, though. I like these structures. Bishop e7, a mistake. Bishop d3 is the best. Castles. The engine wants the immediate... Oh, wait, what? Doesn't that just allow f6? Take, king h8. Queen h5, king g8, queen g6, king h8. What's the idea? Knight f3, if take. Knight e5, threatening this. I thought there was queen e8 in these lines. Oh, I can go for this. Take, and if here... Bishop f8 is the key move. Okay, and then we're up in exchange. And we castle, protecting our knight, I suppose. Anyway, I went knight e2, which is still completely fine. Bishop e6 is a mistake. c5 has to be played. Black has to play c5, which he eventually does, but it was too late. After bishop e6, I castled. Knight f4 is slightly better. Why didn't I like this? What was my reasoning? I think I just thought it didn't matter. Oh, sorry, no, it was queen d7. That's what I was concerned about. And then after take, my queen is hit. But I guess it doesn't matter. After queen h5, if g6, then I just take it. And then... Queen h5, king g8, and then what? Bishop h6, I would assume. Rook f7... Queen g6, king h8, and I just win the rook. Oh, no, I can't because of this. So rook f1 is the best move. And I mean, I'm threatening mate. And if the bishop moves, king g1, rook f1, and I just win. I castled, though, which is fine. And c5 is the best move. Here I go rook b1, which is... It doesn't really change anything, as I said. It's kind of just a throw-in move. And I was expecting pawn b6, which would be a mistake after knight f4, which is what I was going to play. My opponent went c4, which is still not a good move. The best move is knight c6, just giving the pawn up, which I would happily take, right? No issues at all. And if c4, then we just go bishop f5, and we're doing well. Like, take, f6. I can probably go e6, or, oh, just queen e6. Yeah, okay. My opponent went c4, bishop f5, b6, queen g3. Engine prefers queen g4. I think what I didn't like was after take, I thought queen d7 was annoying. With, like, a pin. But I guess the rook hangs. But no, then my rook hangs. Rook bf1, I saw this. Knight c6. And then it wants to go back to g3 anyway. So I thought going to g3 straight away was better. Engine says bishop h8, sorry, king h8 best move, which is what I was expecting. Here, queen h3 is the best response, threatening mate and the bishop. So you probably have to take, and after rook takes, if you go for queen d7, knight f4? What's the idea of that? Wait, I'm really confused. King g8, rook f7, queen h3. Wait, why can't you just take? Oh, e6. I did not see e6. That's a hell of a move. That's a hell of a move. So yeah, g6 was definitely not the way to go because of bishop h6. I mean, I can also take, apparently, and go bishop h6, rook f1, but I thought this was unnecessarily slow. I thought bishop h6, and the engine wants to take on f5, and I was kind of expecting this rather than rook e8. And after rook f5, I mean, we're still winning. Like, if you move the rook bf1, and, I mean, how are you defending? You just can't. The best line is bishop f8, and bishop f8, rook f8, pawn e6 is crushing. That's a cool move. And, like, I mean, what do you do? If you go pawn f6, there's knight f4. And it's just such a cool move. Like, this is such a major threat. Because, like, take, king here, I'm going to mate you with rook h5. There's just so little that black can do. So he goes rook e8, take, and knight f4. And there's too many threats. My opponent did find bishop h4 and queen e7, which I thought was quite a nice idea. But it, unfortunately for my opponent, doesn't work. I mean, you know, g3 is also perfectly fine, and the bishop's trapped. But knight g6 is killer. If you don't take the knight, you're going to lose everything. So you have to take the knight. And after queen g6, king h8, the engine recommends bishop g7, which I did consider briefly. And I mean, bishop g7 is very winning, because if queen takes, which you have to do, I mean, if you go king here, then rook f8? Bishop f6? That's a cool line. That is a cool line, I've got to say. Yeah, because if bishop f6, there's king f8, and the game goes a little bit longer. But, yeah. And if queen g7, I guess I just take here, and if king here... I mean, there's rook f7 at the very least. But I figured rook f7 was the easiest thing, because you have to sack the queen, because otherwise you get mated. There's no way to defend h7. So my opponent takes, I take back, and he resigns, because, I mean, it's just there's no material. Like, technically, black has a rook and a minor piece for the queen. But the king has literally none of its own pieces around it. It's completely surrounded by my pieces. Black isn't developed at all. And there's just weaknesses everywhere in the black camp. So, yeah, very interesting game. I hope you guys enjoyed. As I kept referencing, that full Vienna guide, right there. Check it out if you want to either learn the Vienna or refresh some of your lines. And if you want to see the previous episodes of this rating climb, then check out the playlist down there. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in one of those videos.